All right, guys, welcome in to Two Countries, Two Americas, All Sports. This is episode 18 here on March the 1st, 2022. Wow, we're already at the third month of 2022, a year that's going to go down the history books one way or the other. But we're going to keep on rolling along right here on this podcast as long as we can, I guess. I'm Nicholas Hill, live from Chattanooga, Tennessee, the United States. And joining me from Americana, Sao Paulo, Brazil is Gustavo Tomazeli. Gus, how are you doing? I
Do,
guess. I'm
doing really well, doing really good. Nice as always. Have this podcast with you. And first of all, I would like to congratulate you here live with your new position. I'm so happy for you, man.
Yeah, so I'm definitely going to be announced not in the coming days, but I'll still be here in Chattanooga for that. But definitely got some big time news today that I'm looking forward to moving forward in my own personal career. But uh, outside of that, it's certainly been an interesting couple of weeks. Definitely balancing what's been going on in the world and still keeping up with sports. And that's kind of where we want to start tonight is how does a war, being a wartime affect sports? Because if you look back over the decades, if you go back to the era of World War II, a lot of sports leagues had to cancel their seasons. They really couldn't do a ton. The NFL, they did have seasons during World War II, but teams had to combine because most of their players were gone. The Olympics didn't happen for 12 years between 1936 and 1948. And we're clearly not in that situation at least
The
yet.
World, the World Cup didn't happen, between 1939 and 1940. I think it was was 1942 and 1946. The World Cup also did not happen.
Right. It's yeah, things obviously when you have a conflict that large, it supersedes any sporting event that could ever happen. But we definitely want to talk about this because obviously what's been going on with Russia and Ukraine, and we're not really going to be sitting here talking about the military conflict. I'm not an expert on military conflict. I don't know if you are, Gus, but
No, in Brazil we're not used to war here. I think the last time Brazil fought a war with another country was 1864 with
Jesus.
Paraguay. So here we're not much used to being involved with wars. We have our own demons to fight.
But I'm kind of jealous because I do think we get involved in too much. Although I'm glad at least so far we're not getting involved, at least as the U.S. But clearly the United States is yeah, the world's largest military and has more often than not, I think all but like 20 years of our existence, been fighting someone in the world. So it's been a there's been a lot that we've certainly dealt with, but definitely the topic of sports in wartime and how they kind of coincide. You know, I feel like one place to start off with is increased amounts of patriotism that tends to occur. Like I think of the Mets and the Yankees right after 9/11 and how they brought out President George Bush and it was all about USA, USA, or one game that a coworker of mine brought up the other day. The Mets Phillies game from 2011, the night that Osama bin Laden got killed, and how the game when that news broke didn't even matter because the entire ballpark was celebrating the death of the terrorist that brought about America's greatest tragedy since Pearl Harbor. And there are moments where the unity that war and conflict can cause that can enhance the sport. But obviously, no one wants to be in this situation except for the people who are being aggressors and causing the situation. And it just it's a really weird mix, because like at the end of the day, sport these are games, right? These aren't life or death. But
Even though
when people are suffering, they can mean so much more.
Yeah, and even though some people may take to the extreme, in Brazil it feels like, uh, fans feel like going to war with other teams. But yeah, like of course, they're not. It's not a real war.
Right. Um, yeah, definitely. It causes a lot of people who may disagree on a ton of other stuff to become united because it's a rally around the flag effect that they want to defend their homeland. They want to support an ally of theirs. And obviously in the situation of Ukraine, you know, most countries are supporting Ukraine because they think Russia is being the aggressor. They think Russia has no right to be in Ukraine, which I agree with that stance. I I don't have not heard a good argument for why they should be there outside of Putin's fantasy of reuniting the Soviet Union. But I guess the most interesting point that's come out of this is effectively Russian athletes and Russian teams being banned from international competition. FIFA has banned Russia from their international competitions. The LC hasn't yet, but I would imagine they might.
Russia was already out because they were competing
Yeah,
at the I think it was
the Olympic Committee.
yeah
But
the
even then, like, do you just ban them outright? Like, because I mean, I know like you've banned the official federation, but do you ban the athletes themselves from showing up?
yeah. And I feel like right now FIFA, it's like, oh my god, we're so lucky. The World Cup in Russia was 2018. I
Oh yeah,
couldn't even imagine if the World Cup in Russia was this year. The mess, like,
the,
imagine moving a World Cup host.
right. I mean, the Champions League had to leave St. Petersburg, but that was just one game. You know,
Yeah,
unfortunately, that's not the entire tournament they had to move.
and the Champions League final move being moved is not you know it's been the last three Champions League finals had to be moved. I think the last two were in Portugal, and this one is going to be in France. And the original places for those were different than what actually happened.
Right. In addition to that, too, Formula One, they've removed their Grand Prix from Russia as well, so they're not going to go race there either. It really is going to potentially set back Russian sports and Russian athletics years. I mean, in addition to everything else, is going to set back Russia generations. I mean, losing a third of your currency and a fourth of your stock market is also going to do that. But from the outside, I guess the question is, how much should we really punish Russian athletes? Because I think it's fair to say that this is a war of Vladimir Putin's choosing, of Vladimir Putin's desire. For whatever reason, he has decided to go after Ukraine. It's not, Alex Ovechkin. It's not Maria Sharapova that's making the call to go into Ukraine. How much really should we be punishing Russian athletes?
Yeah, because at the end of the day, even though they still represent the nation of Russia, they don't necessarily agree with everything Vladimir Putin does, or they don't want to promote that. It's just they want to compete. Of course, I think professional athletes in the NHL, and you're going to talk about that in your hot take, but at the end of the day, they're still kind of doing their job in America. I don't think they're going to be affected. I think the problem is the Olympians, the Olympic athletes, who their main stage is competing for their nation. So in their tough spot because at the end of the day, they depend on their nation to in their biggest showcase in their career.
Right. And that's really a difficult decision because I don't blame Poland or any other team for not wanting to go to Russia and play them right now. Like I wouldn't. I wouldn't go play in Russia right now because you don't know what their government's going to do. Like you don't know if they're going to punish you for something you said outside of their own borders. It's kind of like almost going to China or like because I know I've written an anti-Chinese article before about their government. And I know that if I went there, there's a good chance I'd get arrested because I've written and potentially tweeted, anti CCP rhetoric, and it's unfortunate, but if you are not going to abide by the general human rights that the majority of countries have agreed to at this point in our civilization, then you're going to suffer some consequences as the host. But it's different than the athletes. And I do think it's disturbing that we've seen some of the NHL players like Ovechkin, like Perinia. I think that's how you say his name. And some of the others across the league, because there's a lot of Russian players in the NHL, that they're getting threats. They're getting death threats. They are getting targeted. And I think that's unfair. Like, I do think that these guys, they're not the ones telling Russia to go into Ukraine. A lot of them have come out and said they don't agree with the war. It's like how with China, like you can't blame every Chinese person for the actions of Xi Jinping. Not every Chinese person is doing the Uyghur genocide. Not every Chinese person is oppressing Hong Kong, Tibet, and wants to invade Taiwan. Like it's an overgeneralization. It's like saying every American wanted to invade Iraq. Like it's just that's not how it works. And I do think it's extremely dangerous to overgeneralize an entire population based off the actions of their leader. Because, I mean, let's face it, Vladimir Putin is a dictator. And he does things that the vast majority of that population doesn't want. I would imagine if the population knew the full details of this, the full accurate details, almost none of them would want to go do this. But, yeah.
Let me just give a big shout out to my friend Icaro. He's a big New York sports fan. He's wearing he was wearing the Yankees hat today. He's watching us in Americana as well. So big shout out to him and also Renata. Big shout out to the people watching us right now here in Americana. But in terms of war and because like it said about rhetoric, of course, a lot of people in their minds have the 1930s, Nazi and fascism use of sports. The Italy's, winning the 1934-1938 World Cup advanced fascism, and Germany hosts the 1936 Olympic Games. But I don't. Today, I think the geopolitical spectrum is very different.
Right. It almost seems like I heard someone talk about this the other day, how basically to do anything now, you basically need the consent of the world. And clearly, Russia did not have the consent of the world to go into Ukraine. Like, if you have the consent, people aren't going to freeze your bank accounts and kick you out of the global trading system. But, in this case, Russia did go against the wishes of the world. And now they're going to pay dearly for it. And we'll see how far this goes truly with their athletes. But it's going to be interesting. I think one arena is going to be really interesting is tennis. Because there's typically a couple of really good Russians that go to the major tournaments in tennis. And I think, outside of the NHL, that's one where you're going to see this potentially really rear its ugly head. Like, especially when they go to Wimbledon, when they go to the French Open, when they go to the U.S. Open. Those are not countries that are friendly with Russia right now.
Oh yeah, and you talk about setbacks. Of course, I think Russia is not gonna host any major Olympic event or any major sporting event. I believe in like what 5 years, I would say, and even can isolate Russia. Like let's say soccer. I don't think UEFA will be very friendly in keeping Russia into their federation. I think Russia is going to have to find maybe another continent to play. Their to qualify for the World Cup and play their continental tournaments.
Right.
Maybe they can look to play for Asia. Because
Yeah, but are they going to take them in though? Like, they don't really have any friends over there right now either.
The Asian Football Confederation, I think they will be welcomed by China. I think China will be the one that will help Russia accommodate there
Yeah.
because even Australia.
DPRK would, like North
What?
Korea. like the
Yeah,
DPRK.
even North Korea. They're two parts of the Asian Football Confederation, and even the president is there. Australia technically is not in Asia, but Australia plays for the AFC Confederation.
Yeah, well,
So
they will have an issue with it though. Is like they will they would fight it. At least I would
yeah,
think. So it's a I don't know. They're stuck in a rock and a hard place right now, and well, I mean, obviously, Putin put every single Russian in this position, and obviously, this is not as important as the millions of Russians who are going to be facing starvation and having no valuable money to their names. But certainly, as a sports podcast, it's certainly worth discussing because this is something that our countries, Brazil and the United States, should always keep in mind when we're doing stuff. Because when you undergo a operation like this, it affects every single part of your society. So, you know, it's always a reminder to tread lightly. And obviously, that's more, I feel like, for the U.S. because I feel like we're more susceptible to do something this stupid than Brazil. But, yeah.
I mean, I don't even remember Brazil being affected by. I mean, Brazil got a little bit benefited because after World War II, Brazil was chose to be the host of the World Cup because Brazil was the largest nation that had connection to soccer that had any ability to host the World Cup because Europe was devastated by. So Brazil was the obvious choice.
Right. 1950, of course, the U.S. upset England in that
Yes, I went
tournament
to that
famously.
stadium. I went, yeah, it's in Minas Gerais, the stadium there. And Brazil got the largest World Cup final upset ever. Brazil, the host nation, only had to tie to win the World Cup, and they lost to Uruguay. The
Yeah.
Gija scored a goal.
Because I remember them in 2014 talking a ton about that, about how Brazil had never let that down. And now there's 2 World Cups they hosted that they'll never let down.
Yeah, yeah.
It's I don't know. But, yeah. Any other comments on this? Because I feel like, we're obviously, I feel like most rational people are against war. And, but at the end of the day, don't just treat random Russian people terribly because of this, because the majority of Russian people have nothing to do with this invasion. And even many of the soldiers who are in Ukraine have been misled and didn't realize what this war would actually be like.
I mean, in Brazil right now, the most connected we are to this war is because a lot of soccer players, a lot of Brazilian soccer players were playing in Ukraine, especially in Donetsk, which was one of the cities that was heavily affected by this war.
Yeah,
And a lot of Brazilians were playing there. I think in the total roster was like 12
right.
Brazilians.
Yeah. Uh, were they able to get out? Okay, or are they
Yeah, I
still stuck
believe
there?
they were able to get out. They were able to get out. But the
Yeah,
most iconic case was Junior Moraes because he I think he was playing in Ukraine for like almost 10 years. So he got Ukraine citizenship. So he, I guess, had to to serve in this war, but he was able to go to Brazil, but he donated money to people fighting the war.
right. And I think that's because that's something I'm looking into doing too. Because I am inspired by the spirit of the Ukrainian people. Those guys are brave for facing off against an army much bigger than theirs, knowing that they're not going to get a ton of help from the West because of what that could entail if we try to all start a war against Russia. But clearly we're going to continue to follow this, see what effects it has on sports. Do you have any last comments on?
No, I think that's all. I mean, let's move on to American topics because there's also another big conflict down in Jupiter, Florida, that involves heavily
Mhm.
the American pastime.
Yeah, well, it's going to be the American past its time if this doesn't change
I love
its.
that.
Uh,
I love it.
yeah, it's
Baseball from America pastime to America past its time.
yeah. I mean, it's already been past its time. I feel like it's that this could be a death blow to Major League Baseball. I think. Okay, it'll always exist, but its days of being like the heyday, must see sport are done. I mean, because here's the deal, right? You had the whole crap show of 2020 with COVID, and that really wasn't their fault. That whole situation got forced upon them, but the way it got handled, I think, rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, and no one really sees that season as a legitimate season. And now, in a time where we're starting to get back to normalcy, a lot of people are getting rid of COVID mandates, mask mandates, and they were looking forward to going back and enjoying baseball back in the ballpark. Not going to happen, at least in the major league now. You might want to go check out your minor league teams or college baseball teams or youth baseball teams because there's a lot of them. But in the case of MLB, it's just not going to happen. And at least not initially. So the first two series have been canceled. And I fear that we're going to have more be canceled. I think we're going to have at the very minimum, a short season, and at the very worst, no season at all. And even though part of me is selfishly, would be like, okay, at least the Braves remain World Series champions for another year. If we have no baseball, like I want to see
So,
some baseball.
so as I put on our screen for our YouTube and Facebook viewers, the Major League Baseball Commissioner Rob Manfred issued a letter called "A Letter to Baseball Fans," basically detailing all the gridlock between the Major League Baseball and the Major League Baseball Players Association. But basically, what they said that you mentioned was the calendar dictate that we are not going to be able to play the first two series of regular season games, and those games are officially canceled. We are prepared to continue negotiations. We have been informed that the Major League Baseball Players Association is head back to New York, meaning there that no agreement is possible until at least Thursday. Currently, champs could not meaningfully operate until at least March 8th, leaving only 23 days before scheduled opening day. I mean,
Yeah,
it just
I
showed a mess. It's just a mess.
yeah, and there's no way that the MLB comes out looking good. Like Rob Manfred should be fired. Like
Yeah, it should be fired. That's the end. I think the Major League Baseball should fire Rob Manfred.
yeah, like it. There's no reason to keep him on. He's made the wrong decision at every step of the imagination. Yeah, some of the demands they made during the 2020 year, I think, were bad. Last year, moving the All Star game away from Atlanta was bad. Um, for no reason at all. I mean, I understand that the Georgia law. I don't agree with that Georgia law that MLB moved that game away for, but you punished a lot of business owners who had nothing to do with the signing of that law, and you moved it to uh, a city that didn't really need that event. So it's just, I don't know, it was just done. Just everything that the MLB does these days is done, and
No,
Robert Manfred
it's just a
needs to go.
contract. It's just a contrast between like the contrast between Rob Manfred and Roger Goodell. It's like like light years. It's like worlds apart.
And they need a new commissioner who knows how to market their sport. I mean, if you ask someone who doesn't avidly follow baseball, like they can't tell you what Mike Trout looks like. They couldn't tell you what Johanny Ohtani looks like. They couldn't tell you what Ronald Acuna looks like. These are your superstars. They know what LeBron and Giannis look like. They know what Patrick Mahomes looks like. They know what Joe Burrow looks like. They don't know what the baseball superstars are. And I think a new commissioner's first objective would be to re-ingratiate baseball into the American psyche because right now baseball is completely out of the American psyche. And that is a disaster for the sport long term because think about like watching like Field of Dreams, right? Or any baseball piece of media from the 20th century. They're talking about Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, Shoeless Joe Jackson, these mythical figures that, you know, kind of dominated the American sports landscape in the early of 20th century. When was the last time a baseball player had that type of impact? Like Alex Rodriguez, maybe Derek Jeter. Yeah, no one's had that in the last 10 years. It's it's just really kind of sad because I remember watching the Field of Dreams game and then watching the Field of Dreams movie and the James Earl Jones quote of, baseball, it keeps on going. It goes from generation to generation, crisis to crisis. But is it really going to continue, at least in its current form? The MLB is the oldest professional sports league, and it's been that way because it's always been able to be a part of the American psyche. No matter what troubles you have, no matter what's going on, there's always a baseball game on somewhere where you could just sit back and relax and enjoy the American pastime. Or if you're in the city that the game's going on, you could go down, pay a couple of bucks, and just enjoy a baseball game for an afternoon. Eat some Cracker Jacks. You don't have to worry when you're ever going back. I'm not going to sing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game," but it's really one of the most famous American songs is about taking you out to a ball game. And I think MLB has completely lost their sights. They're talking about putting 14 teams in the playoffs. I'm sorry, but compared to the other leagues, I get why the NFL does it. There's only 17 games in the NFL season. I get why
You want
NBA
to,
does it.
yeah, you go ahead. Sorry.
But the MLB, you play 162 games. Teams have enough chances to make the playoffs. If they lose too many games, that's on them. Keep it at 10 teams. That makes it a true playoff. And I mean, because the only thing, because here's the issue: the players don't get paid more if there's more playoffs. And I think that's where the players are completely against this idea. The owners want those extra playoff games for more revenue, but I really think if they want to maximize their revenue, I would cut back some games. I really would.
It's about creating urgency. That's why the NFL is the king of American sport, alongside for me college football. It's about urgency. Like when you create 162 games, the fans are gonna care about the regular season. Of course, by September, maybe you start caring about it because then you the race for the to get to the postseason, to get to October. But
Right,
during July to August, July to early September, July and August, where there's no other sport, there's no NFL, there's no college basketball, no college football, no NBA, they can thrive. You know, is the dead period, is the period where there's regular season games that basically are not as value as games in later September, where
right.
there's a lot of competition.
Right, and even as an avid Braves fan, like I don't sit down and watch every single game because there's just too many. Like, there's no point because no one game's gonna make or break the season. It's that's why you look at stretches of games, and I think NHL and NBA have the same problem too. There's too many of those games. Like compared to like college basketball, there's only 30 games. Every game matters in college basketball. College baseball, even there's only 60 games. I mean, that matters way more. I think the sweet spot, I said 60 was too low, 162 is too high. Like, I think like 120 maybe is more reasonable for baseball.
But the players need the 162 games to be played because that's how they make their money.
Right,
So they need those games because the structure of payment in Major League Baseball makes the players, lobby for those 162 games. That's why I guess now they're more upset right now. Those players in the Major League Baseball Players Association of players of games being canceled is because they're gonna lose their part of their salary.
yeah. I mean, they're going to lose 6 out of like 162, I believe, at least so far, and they could lose way more than that. Which, I mean, obviously, if you're like Max Scherzer, that's millions of dollars. For some, it's only like a couple of $100,000. So it's a mess. I don't know how they fix it because I think both camps want so different outcomes, want so many different outcomes at this point that I don't know how you come to a medium, how you agree, because there's too much money to lose on both sides.
Yeah,
It's just a shame, and my updated hot take will kind of implore you to explore some other options while the MLB's out. But
yeah, because
hopefully this time next week. Go ahead.
it looks like minor league baseball is still go business as usual. They're gonna keep playing. I saw the updates. They're gonna start, I think, next month, early April.
Yeah,
The your Chattanooga Lookouts are gonna face the Tennessee Smokies. I love that rivalry. It's really fun. Minor league baseball. It's what Brazilian lower division soccer should look into in terms of getting fans, into the entertainment of sport. Minor league baseball, like all the majority of presidents and owners of Brazilian small clubs should go to a minor league baseball game in America and see how they do it. Because I was still amazed how the Tennessee Smokies could get 4,000, 5,000, even sometimes 8,000 people to a minor league baseball game that, at the end they're not, you know, of course they want the Tennessee Smokies to win, but they're not there to watch only the Smokies. They care about the environment, the atmosphere. So I feel like, Brazilian small teams like, Rio Branco here in Americana and other small teams from all over Brazil should look into this and say, how can we connect to our community the way minor league baseball does? Because we're both the same thing. Like, we're a small, really small team in a small city that needs to attract fans that are not loyal to this team. They care about the Braves in Tennessee, in Atlanta, in Georgia, or the other Major League Baseball teams.
right. And it just goes to the minor league baseball teams. I'm very curious to see what this does to college baseball, but I've got more to say on that later. So next, we'll talk some college basketball. That's gonna, as we are now. Oh, go ahead.
No, what a week! The top six AP poll teams lost, and let's talk about first the number three team in the country. That now is number five, Auburn Tigers, and their loss to our Tennessee Volunteers because
Right.
Bruce Pearl, what a comeback to Knoxville.
Yeah, I mean he's been back several times now, but he had beaten the Vol 6 straight times until Saturday. Now Auburn looks like they were going to win this game. They were playing it very well on defense. They were up 39-28 early in the second half before the Vol stormed back. And you got to think some of the freshmen like Brandon Huntley Hatfield has some huge baskets in this game. Kennedy Chandler had some huge baskets in this game. Sakai Ziegler with his energy. And it's just another huge home win for the Volunteers. They're undefeated at home. And I'm actually going to their final home game on Saturday. I'm going to see them play Arkansas, which is Arkansas's number 14 this week in the polls. And they just beat the Vols last Saturday. So it's going to be a great game. And what to really watch for in the SEC is if Auburn loses tomorrow at Mississippi State, then the Vols will be playing for a share of the SEC title on Saturday. So it's going to be a intense atmosphere for sure at Thompson Arena, and I cannot wait to be in the atmosphere. The Vols tonight held off Georgia in a tie game. I believe it was 75-67. No, 75-68 was the final, and this was a lot closer than I wanted it to be. To be
I mean,
honest,
they're tied on half.
yeah, their defense didn't play great tonight. I will say that. Now, Georgia isn't a horrible offensive team, but offensively, especially Josiah Jordan James was amazing. Like he had, was it 4 frees tonight? He was something special. Santiago Vescovi was very good on the offensive side of the ball tonight. The veterans really got Tennessee through. And there was a really was a critical point late in this game. So the Vols are up 64-49. Georgia scored 11 straight points, 64-60 with 4 minutes left. And you do have to remember, heading into this game, the Vols had not won a Stegman Coliseum down in Athens in 11 years. But John Fulkerson, the 6-year senior, got 2 straight buckets that really put the game out of reach. And it was a gutsy win. Even though Georgia is not a good team, they're 6-24 now, 1-16. Going on the road in the middle of the week is hard. And to win those games is hard. And the fact they were able to both take care of business in Missouri and Georgia is huge. Because what this means for the Vols is, in my opinion, they're at least a free seed, no matter what happens the rest of the year. And I think they have a legit shot now, especially if they beat Arkansas Saturday and then make a run next week. A 2 seed is not out of the question. This team right now is 22-7, 13-4, and they've played one of the hardest schedules in the entire country. I believe Ken Palm has us at number 3 overall in the entire country. So Rick Barnes, really scheduled hard in the non-con. It's paid off a ton because we were able to get some big wins like Arizona. Was one big one. Of course, they got a whole bunch of big ones in SEC play. Auburn, Kentucky, LSU. Yeah. I mean, they've beaten 3 different top 5 teams. Arizona, Auburn, Kentucky. This year, this is honestly one of the best years for Tennessee basketball ever. And I'm starting to wonder, is this team just as good as the 2018-2019 team, the last team with Admiral and Grant? Admiral Schofield, Grant Williams. Because, that team I think was better offensively. But this team to me is way better defensively. And that team, I feel like, fell off in mid-February. And just wasn't the same down the stretch. While this team is surging at the end of the year. Like right now, this team is playing better in early March than that team was playing in early March. So I don't know which team is better to me. Well, what do you think?
You're following them more than I am, to be honest, though. I've been really, focusing on Brazilian soccer, especially here, soccer in the state of Sao Paulo. But what I could listen the game in versus Auburn is that this team is more physical than the team last year, and it's more consistent because the team last year had a lot of inconsistency, and I feel like this team has been built toward that consistency.
Yes, absolutely. And really, it's really a nice mix of all of the veteran presence of the young guys like Kennedy Chandler and Zakai Ziegler, the late season, additions of Brandon Huntley Hatfield and Jonas Idu. The only thing that really stinks is that we're not really going to see Olivier Kamwa being able to contribute right now because of his injury. But outside of that, you can't really ask for much better if you're a Vols fan, in my opinion, because this has been just an amazing team to watch grow. And if you let me, I would like to actually share the latest bracketology released this morning.
I can, if you want, I can do that. Where?
Let's see. Hold on. Window. I'm going to share it real quick. That's from Joe Lunardi at ESPN. Hold on. It's not letting me do it.
Yeah, I'll get. I think. Let me. Yeah, I got it. Let me.
Yeah, it ain't let me do it on my end. But look, so right now Tennessee is a free seed, at least as of this morning, and they'll stay a free seed after winning today. They have them playing Princeton in the first round, which would be interesting. Princeton's always a weird team to play. They have their famous Princeton offense.
I just see that. Oh my God, Tennessee Memphis on a playoff after all the, Kenny Hardaway and Rick Barnes. Jeez, I would.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if Memphis would get there because I wouldn't expect them to beat both Indiana and St. Mary's. I'm just gonna be honest. I don't think they make it to Tennessee.
I really want to imagine the hype of a Tennessee Memphis game after this year's game was canceled due to weird circumstances, to say the least,
Yeah.
and all the animosity between Rick Barnes and Hardaway.
Yeah, the one thing that interests me in that particular bracket is Duke being in our quadrant. And, I feel like playing against Duke this year in the NCAA tournament is going to be very hard because the refs are going to be against you. Because, I'm not one to be a conspiracy theorist, but I feel like Coach K, they're going to want to keep him in this tournament as long as possible, considering he is, retiring.
Yeah, like you don't want to face Duke in this tournament. That's one team you don't want to face.
Yeah, because I feel like it's going to be stacked against you. Um, of course, right now the 4-1 seeds are Gonzaga. They're still the overall number one, even though they lost to St. Mary's the other night. You have Kansas. Somehow, I don't understand how they're number one. Baylor and Arizona. Because every time I've watched Kansas this year, they're not very good. Now, I understand they've won a lot of the games I haven't watched, but every time I've seen them, like I saw them play Kentucky, they got blown out on their home court. I'm just not that impressed with Kansas as their number one seed. And I don't think in that, like, I think they'd get past Seton Hall or Wyoming. But Arkansas, I'd pick Arkansas to beat Kansas in the Sweet 16. To be honest with you, because Arkansas right now is a 5 in that bracket. I think Arkansas could definitely rise some more, especially if they were to somehow knock off the Vols on Saturday in Knoxville. Auburn, they've gone down to a 2. That's interesting. Auburn reminds me a lot of the Tennessee team from a couple of years ago, the 2018-2019 team. Like, they were amazing. They couldn't lose a game, and then they kind of stumbled down the stretch. They have one player you're really scared of, Jabari Smith. Jabari Smith is their Grant Williams, and kind of like Walker Kessler is kind of like their equivalent of Admiral Schofield, and
And
they scream Sweet 16.
isn't Colgate the program that had a huge upset not a long time ago?
Well, remember they almost upset us. Like we
Yeah,
were tied with them in like late in the second half. Like I was scared we were going to lose to Colgate. Um, so that would be identical to Tennessee actually. So
and
that
another
would be. Go ahead.
and another matchup that would be interesting: Kentucky, North Carolina. With I don't. I mean, it would be the first tournament without Dean Smith, right?
Kentucky would destroy North Carolina. I don't think that would be very close. I'm not sure North Carolina even beats Iowa State. Like North Carolina's defense sucks. They're not very good. Their offense is pretty good. Defense isn't. One team that I would watch up USC at 6. That to me would be a dangerous team. Obviously, I really hope Chattanooga, my home city town, makes it. They got to win the SoCon tournament starting this week. They're the number one seed in that tournament. Hopefully, they win it in Asheville, and hopefully, they are far away from the Vols because that's the last thing. That's the number one thing I think I'm scared of. Is Chattanooga plays Tennessee in the first round. Because if Chattanooga beats Tennessee, I'm not going to be able to wear orange in my home city for a long time.
I mean, if the Vols fall to number 4 seed, then they might face Chattanooga.
Yeah. But fortunately, Chattanooga's been pretty good. So that as long as the Vols keep moving up, I don't think Chattanooga would fall below like a 13. In terms of Chattanooga actually being a dark horse, I don't know. Providence is pretty good. Chattanooga's strength is their backcourt. They have these two guys. They have David St. John Baptiste and Malachi Smith. They're their two best players. They're both really, really athletic guards. They can shoot, drive to the rim. But I don't know how far they can truly go, especially I do feel like they have some interior presence issues. Iona over Texas would be very interesting. I would pick Iona in that game. Rick Pitino is a dangerous, dangerous coach to go up against. I would pick Davidson over Iowa. And, obviously, this is not what the bracket's going to look like, but this is just a hypothetical. And one team that really interests me, too, Houston at the 5 seed, because when you take a look at the net rankings, and the net rankings are basically the modern day RPI. RPI used to be what the committee looked at to kind of evaluate the strength of teams. The net ranking has Houston at number 4 overall, but I don't understand how, because they literally have zero. Well, they have 0 quad 1 wins, and quad 1 is like either top 50 at home or top 100 on the road. I don't know how Houston's for it. Now, Tennessee, for comparison, is number 8. But Tennessee has played 14 quad 1 games. Now, in comparison, Arizona's only played 7. Gonzaga's played 11. So, some teams have played much lighter schedule than others. As I said earlier, Tennessee, according to Kim Palm, is number 3 in the country for strength of schedule.
About Will Wade's LSU facing Michigan?
I'd pick LSU. Michigan, I don't know if they're even going to make the tournament. I think they're in disarray of what happened with Juwan Howard, punching the Wisconsin coach. Texas Tech at 3. I think they would make a run at it. I think Texas Tech would make the Elite 8 in that bracket. At Purdue, again, very similar to that Tennessee team. Great on offense, not good on defense. I think Texas Tech would make the Elite 8. Actually, I think Texas Tech could make the Final 4 in that bracket. I would pick Texas Tech to go to the Final 4 in the West. Actually, it's pretty fun. Let's think about, if this were to be the bracket, who would we choose? So, like in the West, I'm picking Texas Tech. In the East, let me think about this. Like Arkansas on the top, I'd probably pick Villanova.
Yeah, I was gonna say Villanova.
In the South, I'm trying to think. I'm probably picking Duke just because it feels like they're gonna pull a run out of a magical hat. As much as I want to pick Tennessee there, I'm not. I'll pick Duke. And in the Midwest, on the top, I like Arizona, and I'll pick Kentucky.
I don't know. I feel like this North Carolina team is on a good track. I mean, I'll be in the great. I mean, be honest. I haven't followed college basketball this season as much as last year, but I'll make some crazy predictions. In the West, I pick Gonzaga. In the East, I pick Auburn. In the Midwest, I picked no. In the South, I picked Tennessee. In the Midwest, I picked North Carolina.
God, I hope you're right. It'd be the first ever Final Four appearance, by the way, if you're not familiar with Tennessee basketball, ever in program history. So it'd be a glass ceiling that needs to be broken for Tennessee basketball. Tennessee basketball is probably the best basketball program in the country that has never made the Final Four. We're basically Oregon football in that regard.
And it looks like Oregon State wouldn't be making the tournament. So
yeah, they're going to do what they did last year and because the only reason why they were in was because they won the Pac-12 tournament. So, because Oregon Ducks aren't even in. So if you look at the bubble right now, the last 4 in are Memphis, San Diego State, Indiana, Rutgers. First 4 out are Loyola, Chicago, Sister Jean. That gives me PTSD just thinking about it. BYU, Oregon, SMU.
Oh, Loyola, Chicago.
So annoying. The Vols would have made the Final Four that year if it wasn't for freaking Loyola, Chicago. Gosh.
Yeah. And it have Sister Jean, so it's hard to root against it, but definitely.
And I root against them. I don't care. I'll root against Loyola, Chicago to the end of time.
And San Diego State, I remember, I think it wasn't a long time ago, they had a really good basketball program. And the year the tournament was canceled was their best year. They would
have been a 1 seed. They would have been a 1 seed. And I still feel bad for them in Dayton, especially Dayton, because they had Obi Toppin that year, and they would have been a 1 seed too. They both got robbed of their chance, and it sucks because they're never going to get it back. Because you see Dayton right now is the next 4 out team, so they're just not what they were.
but I still really want to see Tennessee Memphis playing in the, I guess would be round of 32.
It would be, yeah. And I think we
So
win. I think we would win.
this game will be a sellout crowd, even though it's in Pittsburgh. It will be a sellout crowd, and
Yeah.
I cannot even imagine the hype and the animosity of that game. There will be a true playoff, rivalry game.
Yeah, it would be intense. And I'm also just thinking about all the jokes that be made about Princeton. Imagine fall Twitter taking on the Ivy League. That would be hilarious. Yeah.
Yeah,
But it will change. We don't know what's going to happen. I'm hoping the Vols could be bumped up to a 2 seed, but we will see. All right. I've got a couple of other points I want to hit on the American side, just some really quick. First, I want to talk a little bit of NASCAR because NASCAR raced out in Fontana, California. And I thought that race was incredible. Now, if you follow Jeff Gluck, he's a writer for The Athletic. He follows NASCAR. He does a weekly racing poll. And usually NASCAR fans are pretty harsh in this poll. Typically, they don't get above 70, 80% yes in terms of whether or not you thought it was a good race. This race had a 93% good race poll. It was fantastic. There was parity throughout the field. It wasn't just the most dominant drivers, up front, leading, competing. Tyler Reddick, to me, was the best driver all day, but he unfortunately crashed. Kyle Larson, who won the title last year, won 10 races, won the race. But not without controversy. He kind of doored his teammate, Chase Elliott, into the wall. And Chase Elliott was very upset with him on the radio, just cussing him out in a storm of rage. But this package, this next gen car, is so freaking good on this track, on these and I hope it translates to all 1.5 mile tracks because these cars can finally pass. There's no such thing as dirty air, and yeah, it's all about the driving talent, which is what NASCAR should be about. And finally, the race is back in the driver's hands. If you have kind of fallen out of love with NASCAR, I'd give it a try again this year. I think it is back. NASCAR to me is back to what it was and what made it great. And the next gen is going to be the reason why it is back. So check it out. They race at Las Vegas this weekend. The last point I want to make about American sports, the NHL here in Tennessee had its first ever outdoor stadium series in Nashville. Now, I think it's like their 50th overall, but they had it in Nashville, and was watching it on TV on TNT seemed like a great success. The place was packed. The Predators fell to the Tampa Bay Lightning 3-2. I know our friend Dylan Becker from the Rock Solid Sports was there. He seemed like he had a fantastic time. I heard it was a fantastic time, and it just definitely shows that hockey's come a long way in the South, that you could fill an entire football stadium full of people to watch hockey. So hopefully that's not the last time. Hopefully, a place like Neyland Stadium gets to host a hockey game one day. I think that would be pretty cool to see. I doubt that'll happen, but we're just kind of waiting to see. Of course, Nashville is, I believe, the number one wild card team right now in the NHL West String Conference. So hopefully they continue to get better and get into a winning mode before the playoffs start, because I'd like to see them make it back to the Stanley Cup Finals. Yeah, that's all I kind of have to say on American sports.
So let's move on to Brazilian sports right now. And Tite just announced that he is leaving the Brazil national team after the 2022 World Cup. He said that whatever happens in this year's, Qatar World Cup, he is leaving the job. He said the cycle was done. I think it's the right move. I feel like he already been to, he'll be his second World Cup. I think it'll be the last guy. I don't even remember the last coach who coached Brazil national team to back World Cups. So he got. I'm confident on this team. I feel like Brazil is really good on offense. I think Neymar has been less individualistic player. I think he's been more playing more like for the team. It still a little bit worries me on defense. I feel like it still needs some, experience. Thiago Silva should be that guy, but I don't trust 100%. I don't trust him 100%. But Tite is leaving Brazil in after this year's 2022. The big question: who's going to replace him? A lot of sports journalists in Brazil advocating that it's a time for a foreigner head coach, especially one from Portugal, especially with all the Portuguese coach fever in Brazil. Right now, Corinthians, Palmeiras, Flamengo all have Portuguese coaches,
Yes,
and
because
both
we
of those.
discussed this last week with this Portuguese coach fever.
Yeah, so I wouldn't even be surprised if the Brazilian national team would try to get Jorge Jesus, which is the most beloved soccer coach in Brazil right now. The only reason he does not have a job is because of all his demands and all his, diva mode. But he will definitely wanted to coach the Brazil national team because it's a dream job. Even Pep Guardiola, the Manchester City coach, said is his dream job because Brazil is such really good on talent that you can definitely build a strong team that can compete in a World Cup, if with any World Cup. So it's a dream job. I still believe in the national team, in the soccer national team, universe. I feel like Brazil is definitely a top job, but of course, some other journalists said that it's outrageous to hire a foreigner coach to coach the Brazil national team because it still should be about what the best Brazil can produce. So getting a foreigner coach would be diminishing the value of the Brazilian coaching, the Brazilian coaching, Brazilian head coaches, which I already feel the value after all the hiring of Portuguese and Argentinian head coaches.
Right, and there's a two-sided coin because one, I do feel like that you should try to hire a coach from your own country because I complained about this with the USMT last week. Like, I have like plenty of American head coaches that'd be great for that job, but when you're a team like Brazil, you have rosters that can win the World Cup. You're like Alabama in college football, right? Like, you're gonna have the talent year in year out to do great. Um, Sometimes you kind of have to go outside the family. That's what Alabama did, right? After Bear Bryant died, they hired coach after coach after coach that had something to do with Bear Bryant. And that kind of held them back for a while. And it was finally when they went outside their comfort zone and went and got a guy like Nick Saban that they were able to reestablish their dominance. And Brazil might have to do that, especially if Brazil loses again in this 2022 World Cup. I mean, as you say, it'll be 20 years since they've won the World Cup. And with the World Cup coming back to the Americas in 2026, I feel because we talked about all the pressure is going to be on the U.S. and going to be on Mexico. Brazil might have more pressure than either of those teams because Brazil, to be at least, is expected to win when the World Cup is on this side of the world.
And it's funny how history repeats itself. The last time a North American country hosts the World Cup was U.S. in 1994, and Brazil arrived in that World Cup also with a 24-year drought of winning a World Cup, and they finally got it. So history sometimes can repeat itself. And I think Brazil has strong possibility to win it this year, especially if Neymar stays healthy, if Tite can keeps the momentum going, and but I think it's fair for him to you know, step down after this year's World Cup. I mean, even if he wins, he want to leave on a high. He wants to leave like Felipão did in 2002. And especially if he wins, he will definitely have a job opening overseas, like Felipão. When Felipão won the 2002 World Cup, he got a coaching job in Portugal and then Chelsea. So winning a World Cup with Brazil definitely opened many, many doors overseas.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and that's why I think you have to consider if you're Brazil that if you can't find a suitable candidate at home, you're going to have to go abroad. But I think a lot of it hinges on what happens in 2022. If this guy, if the current coach can lead a deep run in 2022, I think that definitely supports keeping a Brazilian coach in for 2026. But you got to choose the best coach. I feel like in this situation, if you're Brazil, because I do think at a certain point of a team like that, because I was going to ask how many other countries are like Brazil in terms of you get the right coach in there, they're going to win the World Cup. Like Brazil's one of those countries. I think Germany is one of those countries. England to an extent,
Argentina.
France, Argentina. There's probably the six countries, right? That you would expect any good coach to be able to turn to a title contender immediately.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's the top six. Especially uh, Italy, Brazil, and Germany. They're always favorites. They were the countries that won the most World Cup. They always have good talent. I think the top, the I call the first seed of World Cup countries: Brazil, Italy, Germany, and I'll put France right now. The top two seed: Argentina. I'll put Spain, Portugal, and even I'll say
I'm
uh,
probably overrating England a little bit. Just 'cause I know they
England.
have
England
the.
too.
I know they
England.
have the one, but
I think England on the it will be the bottom of the I'll call the number two seed.
right.
If I would do the like kind of like a college basketball separation in a World Cup, for me, number one seed would be Brazil, Italy, Germany, and what? I see Brazil, Germany,
I feel like
Italy,
France, though. I feel like
France.
France.
Yes, I
Yeah,
was forgetting
yeah,
France. Brazil,
yeah.
France, Italy, and Germany. And the top two will be Argentina, England, Portugal, and Spain.
Yeah, those are probably your top eight for sure, and then your three would be like Belgium, Netherlands. But anyway, to not go further on down that road, it'll be interesting what
I
they
think
do.
I think U.S. and Mexico could be in the fourth seed in
Yeah,
that level.
we're fourth. U.S. might be more like a five, honestly. Um,
Mexico will be the bottom four, and U.S. will be the top five.
yeah, that sounds more like it. We're definitely not in the same realm as Brazil, or Germany, or France, or any team like that. But I think a lot of the Brazilian soccer future hinges on what they do in Qatar, because obviously, I mean, while they had a better show in 2018 than 2014, um, Brazil they expect to win the World Cup, y'all.
Yeah,
So
it's Alabama football. We always expect to win.
yeah, so uh, we'll see if they're able to do it this time around.
Yes, and real quick, also Brazil in international soccer. After 1 year, former Milan and Chelsea Brazilian striker Alexandre Pato scored his first goal for Orlando City. He was player. He was playing in front of his father-in-law, media mogul, Brazilian media mogul Silvio Santos, who has a home in Orlando. So that made the news here in Brazil, and it kind of relates to U.S. I know probably U.S. sports media did not care about this fact, but Brazil gossip and a little bit sports media had a lot of interest in that news, especially because Silvio Santos is like the one of the largest media moguls. He owns the third largest television station in Brazil. His daughter dates Alexandre Pato, which dated also Berlusconi's daughter. So he is more famous for dating the right people than the soccer player, but he was still able to score in this week's MLS Orlando City game versus Montreal. And to finish up some Paulista Championship headlines, Corinthians keep striving. They won 1-0 versus Red Bull Bragantino, and their new head coach, Vitor Pereira, took over on Monday. So a lot of expectations for the new Corinthians head coach. Santos, still a mess. Still, they tie to the last placed team Novo Horizontino 2-2. There, if the playoffs would start today, they would have been out again. And they got an Argentinian head coach, Fabian Bustos. I think they'll still be able to qualify, but it looks they're the worst top four teams in the state of Sao Paulo. And speaking of Sao Paulo Football Club, they got a good win in Diadema in a beautiful goal by Caleri. And Rogério Ceni still experimenting players and trying to find the best formation. And but he's getting results. His team is undefeated in the last 6 games. And Palmeiras had a tie with playing a lot of reserves. I was in that game actually in here nearby city of Limeira. The crowd was fantastic, 8,000 people, and it was beautiful to see the honoring of legendary Santos striker and Inter Limeira former head coach Pepe. He played with Pelé in the 60s in one of the best soccer teams ever in the world. You know, the legendary Santos in the 60s won two Libertadores and two Club World Cups, and also he played for the Brazil in the national team in 1960, 1958, and 1962. And it was so beautiful to see Brazilian fans honoring those who, were good in their sport like Americans do. So I even had the chance to talk to him, and he is like 85 years old, but he's still, you know, as strong as ever. And it was just good. And also, it's good to see sports idols being honored when they're still alive. That's the greatest thing ever, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean Pele, was a big reason why soccer started gaining around in the U.S. A lot of his programs that he brought to the U.S. The television programs, and so he's very important to the history of soccer in this country as well. And obviously, um, I don't know. I'm not well versed to say if he's the greatest Brazilian player of all time, but
Oh, he
he's
is.
definitely the most
Pelé is.
influential. Yeah,
Pelé is the greatest player of all time. There's
yeah.
no doubt. There's no doubt of that.
What about internationally?
Yes, internationally too. He
Hmm.
is even Pepe jokes that he is the number one striker in Santos because Pelé he's a Martian. He's not from this planet. He doesn't count because
Hmm.
he is out of this world of talent. So he always jokes about it. It's like I'm the best player in on here on Earth because Pelé is
Yeah.
from another planet.
Just imagine like what he could do now in the modern game if he were in his prime, like going up against Ronaldo and Messi. Like, I would just love to see him in the modern
Oh,
game.
me too. I would, the team from like the '60s of Santos was just unbelievable of talent and of how beautiful game they play. How you know so many beautiful plays. It was just and also great to talk to one of the legends. It's like in football, you have the chance to talk to Teddy. I feel like if you had a chance to talk to Bradshaw, Marino, Elway, it's kind of like that. It's a legend or Joe Namath.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's just one of those guys that's always gonna be, associated with their sport. He is my Michael Jordan to soccer.
And it's so funny that Pepe, he played and he was a legend in Santos, but he's more beloved in Limeira because he was the coach of one of the biggest upsets here in the state of São Paulo soccer by winning the 1986 São Paulo State Tournament, beating Palmeiras in 2 games in Palmeiras Stadium. So he always jokes about when I wanna be happy, I come to Limeira because Limeira is where his accomplishment meant more. Because in Santos he was just part of a team led by Pelé. Here in Limeira he was the head coach of a team that his accomplishment probably will never be matched again.
Right. Yeah, and that's always interesting when you have a coach that coaches that accomplishes so much at a smaller school and it goes to a bigger team, and they're just never able to get to that same height again. Think of Brad Stevens at Butler when he took him to back-to-back national titles, and then he went to the Celtics and wasn't able to accomplish anywhere near as much. Or Chris Peterson at Boise State, what was able to do with that school, and going to Washington, he made a college football playoffs, but just it never felt the same as when he was at Boise State. So it's when you have a special situation like that, when you are elevating a smaller team to their greatest heights, you have to take full advantage of it.
Oh yeah, and the city recognized you. the mayor, many city councils were there on this. They were honoring with the plaque and everything hours before the game, and the fans, when they announced his name in the stadium before the game, were cheering loudly and chanting his name because they know the accomplishments he brought as a head coach, were historical. Probably Inter Limeira will never win another Paulista title again, or probably will never win a second division Brazilian national championship again, because those are so hard accomplishments nowadays. And even back then, they were hard. Inter Limeira was the first team outside of São Paulo capital and Santos to win a state championship. So that was so historical, and it was so beautiful. The fans in the city recognizing, because as you said, sometimes when you get such an accomplishment in a small team or a small school or such a small community, it means more sometimes. Like, you mentioned Brad Stevens, he probably missed the admiration he had for Butler fans, that Butler fans had for him.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I know those guys want him back. They want to have those days back. 'Cause Butler now is just another basketball program. They're not what they used to be, and they would do anything to go back to those days.
Yeah, and it's gonna be an interesting. I like state championships, but I want to get to the playoffs really soon. I want to, because the playoffs is what matters. The regular the regular season of state tournaments is kind of long and dreading sometimes, but I think it's gonna be like 3 weeks. The playoff starts, and that's what matters. So, and let me get to my hot take, because this weekend was also very sad for Brazilian soccer. So many violent incidents for Paraná fans, invading the pitch and trying to hit and injure their own players as they were losing the game and getting relegated to their state tournament second division, to one of the biggest derbies in rivalries in Brazilian soccer. Grêmio and Internacional had their game postponed because the Grêmio's bus was hit by rocks, and one of the rocks hit one of the Grêmio players in the head, and he had a concussion, had to go to the hospital. And also, Bahia's bus last week was hit by a bomb, and one of the players almost got blind because of it. So it's enough. You need those people to get arrested. They're not sports fans. They're mob. They are criminals. They should be arrested. They need to be punished.
Yeah, sport. I mean, violence in sports is never acceptable, and it's really concerning that we're seeing multiple incidents of that in the same weekend. So, do you think there needs to be some sort of federal crackdown on that? Um,
Yes, and it nerves me is that everybody knows who are the criminals, who are those mob leaders, who are the ones who organizes those kind of things. Not everybody. If you talk to Grêmio, Paraná, and Bahia fans, they know who the bad people are, but the authorities are afraid to get them because they have so many influence. They had so many political influence.
oh yes, yes, absolutely. And that's at least from the outside, something that only the citizens can kind of try to forcibly break up. But there's so many factors that cause those mobs to be so powerful in the first place that um, it may be hard to stop these incidents to keep on occurring.
Yeah, and again, it just makes me sad because it just pushed people away from soccer. People think Brazil is a soccer country, and I feel like it's driven apart. I feel like a lot of people still like soccer, but probably at one point was 50% of the population who really had a soccer connection. For me right now, it's down to like 35%.
Yeah, which hurts all of you. Like that's the one thing that's supposed to unify our country, and it doesn't anymore because of that. And yeah, I think it's on the responsibility of every single club to ensure that their home stadiums are safe for people to come watch a game because yeah, you're gonna get intense, you're gonna cheer for your team. I know how that is, but like you're supposed to be able to walk out safely too.
But the problem is that the two largest incidents were not even close to the stadiums. They were miles apart, but somehow the those criminals knew where the buses were heading to, and just because the thing is, like, if you tell in America that a bomb was thrown into any sports team, they will call this a terrorist act. When a bomb was
Right.
thrown into a bus. In Brazil, it just been treated as an incident, and it's not. It was a terrorist attack. I'll call
Yeah.
it.
I mean, we would be talking about it for a week here, like a week straight, like that. I mean, and that would I think cause like a league to suspend play. It's such like
And and the
someone
crazy
like
thing,
attacked any NFL team like that. I know the NFL would skip the next week. I feel like.
yeah, and here in Brazil, the team still made it to the stadium and played the game. The team that got, a bomb thrown at their bus is still went ahead and played the game.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's insane resiliency by that team. But I really hope they had some sort of therapeutic resources available to them because that's a lot to try to compartmentalize. Okay, we just almost got blown up, but okay, let's go play soccer now. Like that's just an insane decision you have to make for your profession.
Yeah, just let me finalize. I want to show to you, Nick, how the attack, affected.
Oh, I mean, I feel like these governments should be providing armed escorts if this stuff's going to be happening.
Yeah,
Yeah, like I mean
and look at the
that's
player that got
ridiculous.
injured.
Yeah, and that's a disgrace.
Yeah, it's a disgrace. And this incident was even worse because there were, and now the investigation shows the attack was by their own fans, but I wouldn't call even fans. They were criminals that disguised themselves as Bahia fans.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
It's just
God,
ridiculous.
it's terrible.
And oh, I almost forgot. I'm very happy about my hometown team, Rio Branco, finally getting approved to become a true professional team, and they already have an investor group ready to get the soccer side of it. So I'm really happy that Rio Branco looks like it's going to be on the right path on the professional level with an investor group, with the owner, with a CEO, with an infrastructure that really resembles the American sports side of it, with ownership and really like professionalism. And also, they announced their head coach for their season, Beton Alcantara. He's an experienced coach. He had some really important titles in the state of São Paulo, but he has not been successful in the last 3 seasons. That is worries the fans, but he is an experienced head coach, and he looks like it was the right choice.
Good. I definitely hope Rio Bronco continues to get better, and hey, maybe they can go up a division or two at some point. That would be
Yeah, that's what I'm
very cool. Go
hoping
Rio
for.
Bronco. But
That's
to finish
that's
off, yeah, but to finish off the show today, um, kind of circling back to the MLB. If there's not going to be any Major League Baseball, baseball fans are going to have to find another way to get their fix in. And let me introduce you to the wonderful world of college baseball. College baseball is very exciting, way more exciting than I think it has any right to be, but it is. And obviously, we have to start with the Vols, right? The Vols this past weekend against Iona scored 68 runs in 3 games. Absolutely lit it up. They won today against East Tennessee State 4-2. They're 7-0. They're going to play their first really tough competition this weekend. But the online rivalries between these fan bases, especially like Tennessee fans and Arkansas and Vanderbilt fans in baseball, it's hilarious. And these teams have legit beef and legit rivalries. And there's legit talent too. There are players that will play one day and hopefully the MLB, if it ever comes back. But what I'm thinking is in the long term, especially with NIL deals, college baseball has a chance to maybe replace the minor leagues to a certain extent as the main development area for players. And I think it gives college baseball a chance to really grow in popularity. And it really should. College baseball is, I think, a very exciting product. It's certainly, I got into it last year with Tennessee baseball, and I got a lot to learn, of course, about it. But I'm really excited to see where it goes. I think it's in a period of growth. And I think with the MLB floundering the way they are, a lot of baseball fans should be checking it out because chances are, in your local area, there's a college baseball team you can go watch for a very low cost, even with the better teams.
Yes, I mean, I love college baseball. I mean, I've been to ETSU, Tennessee, even UTC college baseball games, and it's always fun. It's a good atmosphere. I feel like, especially the Vols run last year, the fans. I remember that Vandy series. It felt
Right.
big. It felt huge.
Yeah, and then just watching the playoffs in Lindsey Nelson Stadium too was just nuts. Like I always remember Drew Gilbert's walk-off grand slam. Like that was nuts. And hopefully we'll have some more big time moments like that this year from this team. And I think we will. I think they're going to have a great season. They'll contend for the SEC in the College World Series, in my opinion. But it's a long season, and they really haven't played a great team yet. Because Iona, those poor kids, they just weren't ready for Tennessee this weekend. But yeah, that's all I have to say. So I guess it's the end of this pod. Kind of short, but hey, it's not football season. So we're going to continue to talk more about college basketball, especially 2 weeks from now. We're going to have, I guess, our special March Madness episode. Or
And NBA, also, we're gonna dive some NBA as well. I mean, as
we get closer to the playoffs, and NHL as well as the Stanley Cup comes around. So a lot of big time playoffs coming up in America. Of course, you've got all
the state championship playoffs.
Yes, so a lot to talk about as we move forward here throughout this springtime in America and get into the fall now in Brazil. So for Gustavo Tomazeli down in Americana, Sao Paulo, Brazil, I'm Nicholas Hill in Chattanooga, Tennessee, the United States. Thank you for listening to episode 18 of Two Countries, Two Americas, All Sports. Take care, stay safe, and we'll see you again next week.
Till we get y'all, say it.